Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're about to take a totally fascinating journey back into 16th century Eastern spirituality. We're looking at the life, the legacy, and the sheer impact of a foundational figure in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, Srila Vrindavana Dasa Thakura. Ever wonder how world-shifting spiritual movements actually record their history? Well, let's find out.
But first, I want you to consider this. How do you actually document the life of a golden avatar? According to the tradition, capturing the raw, ecstatic, literally world-shaking energy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that wasn't a job for just your average historian or a scribe. It required a very specific, highly spiritually empowered soul, someone whose entire existence was completely intertwined with the divine pastimes they were meant to record.
To understand exactly who this empowered soul was, here's our roadmap for today. 1. The Vyasa of Chaitanya. 2. A divine lineage. 3. The Caitanya-Bhagavata. 4. Defender of the faith. And 5. A legacy of humility.
All right, jumping right into Section 1, the Vyasas of Chaitanya.
So, to really understand the man, we first have to understand the title. In ancient Vedic culture, a Vyasa isn't just an author. A Vyasa is an empowered compiler, a chronicler or a narrator of the Supreme Lord's divine pastimes. Our sources consistently describe Srila Vrindavana Dasa Thakura as the Vyasa of Chaitanya-lila, and that's a huge deal. It means he was the authorized, divinely appointed biographer of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He wasn't just writing down history, he was actively transmitting spiritual reality.
The parallel here is actually brilliant. Think about it. The ancient sage Vedavyasa documented Krishna-lila and compiled the Caitanya-Bhagavata. Fast forward, and Vrindavana Dasa Thakura documents Caitanya-lila in his epic, the Caitanya-Bhagavata. The Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition views them as the exact same incarnated soul returning to document the newest chapter of these divine pastimes. It's like a spiritual continuation.
Moving on to Section 2, a divine lineage.
Let's quickly anchor ourselves with a timeline. He was born around 1507 AD. Now, the sources note there's a bit of historical debate regarding his exact birthplace. It was either Mamigachi or Kumarahata in the Navadvipa region of Bengal. By 1535 AD, he had penned his absolute masterpiece, the Caitanya-Bhagavata, and his earthly departure, or his disappearance, occurred around 1589 AD. But, to be honest, the real story of his birth actually begins with his mother.
His mother was Narayani Devi, the niece of the great devotee Srivasa Pandita, and the tradition recounts this truly miraculous event from her childhood. When Narayani was just a 4-year-old girl, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave her the remnants of his food and told her to chant the name of Krishna. Instantly, she became completely overwhelmed with madness for God, weeping and swooning in divine ecstasy. She was utterly empowered by the Lord's mercy, at just 4 years old.
This crucial detail is captured perfectly in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Narayani eternally eats the remnants of the food of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Vrindavana Dasa Thakura was born of her womb. So you see, his spiritual authority isn't just something he studied for, it's practically genetic in a spiritual sense. It comes directly from his mother's immense piety and the special mercy she got straight from the Lord. He was quite literally born of absolute devotion.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Caitanya-Bhagavata.
The creation of this great text follows a pretty distinct path. It starts with Vrindavana Dasa's initiation by Sri Nityananda Prabhu, the original guru and a primary associate of Lord Chaitanya. Under his direct instruction, Vrindavana Dasa compiled his book, which was actually originally titled the Chaitanya Mandala, but there's a funny little historical quirk here. Another author, Lokana Dasa, used that exact same title for his own biography. So to avoid confusion, senior Vaishnavas affectionately renamed Vrindavana Dasa's work the Caitanya-Bhagavata.
And the reverence for this text within the tradition is just staggering. Listen to what Krishnadasa Kaviraja Goswami, who wrote the later Chaitanya Charitamrita, had to say. He stated, "Since such a wonderful book could not be written by a human being, it seems that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself has spoken it through the mouth of Srila Vrindavana Dasa Thakura." Basically, they viewed this work as divinely dictated. No way around it.
So what makes it so undeniably special? Well, it uniquely captures the raw, ecstatic energy of the Adi-lila, which are the Lord's early pastimes. It intimately explains the deep spiritual bond between Mahaprabhu and Nityananda. The tradition even promises that just hearing it destroys all misfortune. And ultimately, it's considered to contain the very essence of the original Srimad-Bhagavatam. It's literally the foundational map for navigating the teachings of the Golden Avatar.
Let's pivot a bit for Section 4, Defender of the Faith. Now what's really interesting about this next part is the sheer intensity of his words. He boldly declares, even after being told how objectionable it is, if someone still blasphemes the Vaishnavas, then I will kick him in the head. And actually, he repeats this warning multiple times throughout his book. It's an incredibly fierce, totally unapologetic, protective stance against anyone who commits offenses against the devotees. I know, to our modern ears that sounds aggressively violent, but within the spiritual tradition this fierce outward stance is understood entirely differently. It's rooted in absolute, limitless compassion. It's not worldly anger at all. It's a profound kind of spiritual tough love, meant to protect the faithless from the catastrophic consequences of blasphemy.
The great 20th century Acharya Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati beautifully decodes this tension for us. He wrote that Vrindavana Dasa Thakura makes a superficial show of wishing to punish. In fact, he harbors a compassion toward them which knows no limit. In essence, stopping someone from rushing headlong down the path of offensive behavior, even if you have to speak harshly to do it, is the ultimate manifestation of a compassionate guru.
And finally, Section 5, A Legacy of Humility.
Back then, it was practically an unspoken law among 16th century Vaishnava writers to intentionally stay in the background. They possessed such deep humility that they deliberately left out their own personal histories and family lineages. That is exactly why we know almost nothing about Vrindavana Dasa's father. They wanted all the spotlight to shine directly on their preceptors and the Lord, not on themselves.
Despite his monumental contribution, despite writing a text that would guide millions of people for centuries, he claimed absolutely zero personal credit. He insisted that he was entirely unqualified, stating that he only wrote what his guru, Nityananda Prabhu, dictated directly to his heart.
So, what does this mean for us? And how is his legacy observed today? On the days marking his appearance and disappearance, modern devotees in groups like ISKCON honor him in very practical ways. They immerse themselves in his work by reading a chapter of the Caitanya-Bhagavata. They chant the Maha Mantra with renewed focus, praying for even a single drop of the devotion his mother Naralani possessed. And they engage in Shravanam, the process of hearing his glories, to deeply understand the truth of the spiritual master, known as Guru Tattva.
Which brings us to the end of today's explainer, and I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. Vrindavana Dasa Thakura was a man empowered by a 4-year-old's ecstasy, guided by divine dictation, and fueled by a limitless, fierce compassion. So here's the question. If a 16th century writer could capture divine ecstasy so powerfully that his words continue to transform readers over 400 years later, what untamed, breathtaking spiritual realities are we totally missing out on in our modern distracted world? Something to think about, for sure. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and keep exploring.